Big 12 has a weekend where it's kind of like, you're taking a final exam. No, not quite. Those are some other games down the road, but you got to put yourself in position, the final exam. But you're getting evidence. A score's back this week. Now joined by Max Olson, national writer for theathletic.com, and also covers quite a bit the Big 12. Max, hey, how you been?
I'm all right. Now that things have really kind of calmed down on the realignment front, I was able to, really kind of get my life together these last couple weeks. I got my wisdom teeth out last week. That was fun. It's like you got those things you kind of put off when things are really chaotic. You finally get a chance to do. And by the way, there's a season going on. So, we're kind of back to normal here a little bit. And you mentioned it, man. Like this Big 12 weekend is pretty. I really kind of love how this league's shaping up, and this weekend's going to be awesome.
I think this is, if you look at a lot of the games, and there are some that would have maybe more oomph to it, but because we don't know about a few teams that might be better than we think, or maybe not, or maybe teams we thought were better that aren't, don't you think the way the matchups are locked in that we'll know quite a bit about a lot of people?
I think so. The way this conference is kind of going right now, I think it's fun where I think that, as of today, we'll see how things shake out. It depends on who you beat and who you lose to. But as of today, I think there's 9 bowl teams in the Big 12. And other than Oklahoma, I don't know if any of them are better than 8 or 9 wins, right? I think everyone's kind of in that 6 to 8 win range and I think that's going to make for a fun conference this year where everyone kind of can beat everyone. And this week you look at the matchups and I think I like a lot of the underdogs this week, just in terms of at least the spread and stuff, because I think, I think we know that certainly K-State can play with Oklahoma State. We know Baylor can play with Iowa State. We know Texas Tech can probably play with Texas too. I think that, and we'll see if West Virginia can put up a fight against Oklahoma. But I think that, and then certainly TCU SMU is going to be a really legit battle too. So, I think that there's a real chance here where some of those teams like Oklahoma State or Texas that you talked about as being at the top of the conference, maybe they're some of the 6-win teams, and maybe Baylor or Texas Tech or K-State, maybe those teams, 1 or 2 of them could jump up and win 8 or 9 games this year.
What do you make of Steve Sarkisian early on? Is this about how you figured it would go, or are you a little surprised at 2-1 right now?
No, I mean, I think we'll learn a lot this week. I think it's just too early to know what they've got. It's too early to say what Sark or Hudson Card or Casey Thompson. It's hard to make that evaluation at this point because we just haven't seen very much from this team so far. Rice was just totally outclassed in that game, so that you don't really take a whole lot out of that performance. I mean, it was a get right game, and they took care of business, and certainly Rice put up a good fight against Arkansas. So you could say, hey, good job by Texas, but this week and next week, as much as your season gets judged by Oklahoma, between playing Texas Tech and TCU here, we're going to find out real quick if Texas has a chance to be really competitive in this race, or if this is going to be kind of a 6-7 kind of win team. And I think the way Texas Tech has played so far, they definitely look like one of the more improved teams in the conference so far, with how many transfers they've brought in and just how experienced that team is. So I think we're going to find out a lot about Texas. I don't know, certainly they folded up against Arkansas, but it's hard for me after 3 games to feel great about knowing what's going to happen with Texas week to week.
Yeah, Max, and it's 1 loss, and it's to a team in Arkansas that might be pretty good, right? So it's you see them lose, and you go, oh, well, Texas, they're clearly not back again, ha, ha, ha. But what if Arkansas is just really good, and that ends up being really one of their only blemishes? That's kind of how I'm still viewing Texas, wait-and-see mode right now. Yeah,
man, and we're going to find out about A&M this weekend, too. Yeah. I think that matchup is going to be terrific, and certainly if Arkansas beats A&M, then they should print the shirts that they're the Texas State champions, if you can beat both of them. But, I think that that's going to be a great matchup. And, yeah, you're right. I mean, Arkansas, and I think clearly people like Sam Pittman, people like that staff. And I think the way that they rolled in that second half against Texas was so impressive. They're really well coached. And, so how much do you read into that with Texas and say, well, look, they hadn't figured out the QB thing yet, and they just weren't doing anything offensively. The thing with the Texas that you'd want to see from week to week is just they're probably going to win some games just because they've got Bijan, and this is probably one of those games that if you can avoid mistakes and stuff and ride that guy, he certainly has looked spectacular here early on.
So Iowa State and Baylor, a game that we obviously have a lot of focus on in Waco on Saturday. Baylor, Max, they've looked really good. You could see improvement everywhere, but it's also a matter of who they play. They have not been really tested outside of Texas State just making a close game in week 1. Meanwhile, Iowa State hasn't looked that great, and then last week against UNLV, they finally put on the full-blown show. Even Brock Purdy had a massive game. And do you think maybe some of the pressure's off now for Iowa State already having taken a loss and they're set to go on a run kind of like last year? And obviously, your thoughts on Baylor at this point, even though we haven't seen them stacked up against a team of equal caliber.
So is it going to be like 120 degrees on the field this time?
I don't think so. No.
Ouch.
No.
A little cool front this time?
Yeah, it's actually pretty nice right now.
Yeah, that was, the last time they came to Waco, that was obviously such an important game in sort of the implications of the Big 12 race that time in terms of Matt Rule's team taking off from there and Iowa State still being really good, but another early season setback for them. I'm sure that one matters to them, and this is really going to be a great matchup. I think you're right about Baylor, just that when you haven't really been challenged as much through these 3 games, I agree they've been really impressive, and I don't doubt that there's been a lot of progress here in year 2 under Dave Aranda. I think the thing that is important about the Iowa State game is just this is the kind of stress test you need now. Is can you're running the ball really, really well? Can you run the ball on this Iowa State front? And Gary Bohannon, like when he gets in 3rd and longs and stuff, which you're going to in this game, because Iowa State, does a really good job of putting you in tough situations as an offense. Can he make those throws and move the chains and can they be productive? We both know that. We all know that these 2 defenses are great and have the potential to be great and are playing like that so far. So I'm really excited to see how that one goes. I do think that is going to be a really important game in terms of setting the tone for this Big 12 race, and I think it's going to be really close.
Paul Catalina, Craig Smoak, David Smoak with Max Olson, theathletic.com.
Max, nationally, at the top, we've got a lot of questions like Clemson's offense, Ohio State's defense.
Yeah.
Do you see a shuffle maybe coming from beneath them and upsetting the apple cart?
I think that, certainly these teams at the top look vulnerable right now. I think you would say Oklahoma's offense is not really functioning the way that they know it can yet either. And maybe this is the week when they get right and do that. But and you've got CJ Stroud out this week for Ohio State and that whole quarterback situation, in addition to a defense that's kind of a mess. Clemson, against good defense is just not doing anything offensively so far. It's surprising to see. And I think it does create a little bit of excitement, like nationally, that, at least right now, like maybe it won't be the usual 4 teams in the playoff at the end of this. Maybe there can be room for, just as Oregon went over Ohio State kind of sent that message, like maybe there is room here for some new blood here at the top of the race. And I think that's exciting. I don't worry about Alabama too much. I'm not trying to take anything away from their win over Florida, which was a really, really tough win. But, even they showed some vulnerability in that game too. So, certainly I think there's an opportunity here for some other schools to rise up, but you can't screw up and lose games you shouldn't and miss that chance.
Max, you mentioned expansion's calmed down or realignment has calmed down. There's still obviously simmering, smoldering in some ways. It's almost like a dormant volcano. Who knows what's going to happen next?
Yep.
But right now it could be more among the group of 5s about what the AAC does or what the Mountain West allows or whatever. But there's still some to that as well. If in fact, and this is kind of what I've been discussing, is that if the Big 12 was to have a Chapter 2, Boise State, Memphis appear to be kind of locked in. What are your thoughts about either one of them? And again, timeline, we don't know. If it happens, we don't know. Feel like there's some that want it, some that don't. What are your thoughts about those 2?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because, certainly I think Bowlesby and others were pretty intentional in putting that message out there when they added the 4 new members that they're not done, that there's a potential here that, as you get closer to that time when you have to negotiate the new TV deal, and nobody knows how that's going to go, obviously. But, is there another window there to explore adding new members? I think obviously it's like kind of a weird dynamic because there certainly are people at, Memphis and Boise and other schools that are certainly like hurt by getting left out this time. But everything is dictated by money. So like these folks will sit around and wait for a chance in the Big 12 if they can. And right now, especially if these schools in the Alliance aren't looking to make any moves, like you would think the Pac-12 should think again about expansion in the next few years here as they get closer to their TV deal coming up in 24. You would think they would explore that. And so I do wonder if that will be something that sets off some dominoes here in a couple of years. But I do think the Big 12 is trying to keep those options open. And, was there one school that was like a very close runner-up this time? No, I don't think so. But yeah, I think the two you mentioned there both have a lot to offer, especially if you go back to that point of view of, you want to have you want to bring in the schools that have the best football programs, period. I mean, Boise State's been the most successful in terms of top 25 relevance of any of the G5 programs by far. And Memphis is right there, with Houston and BYU from that standpoint. So I think they would be logical targets, but very curious to see sort of what the situation is in 24, 25. And, can you get the leadership on board with that? And certainly, is Bob Bowlesby still in charge by then or somebody else making the call on that? I guess we'll see.
Max, another game in the Big 12 I wanted to get your thoughts on is K-State and Oklahoma State. K-State now in the top 25. They lose Skylar Thompson, and we saw what happened when that happened last year. But Will Howard was good in his start last week. Deuce Vaughn's incredible, obviously. Oklahoma State's been a little – I don't know. They've just been a little shaky so far, and we're able to get that win over Boise. But K-State, Oklahoma State, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I think in terms of the difficulty of the non-conference schedule and losing your quarterback, like K-State probably shouldn't be 3-0. I think it's pretty impressive what they've done so far, and certainly they were dominant against Stanford in that opener, and we saw what Stanford did to USC. They almost lose the FCS game, but that's part of that is losing your quarterback and how deflating that was, and the mistakes they made in that game. And then I thought they did a great job last week against Nevada, and certainly. Jay Norvell's done a great job there, has an NFL quarterback and all that. And that team really stepped up because they trust Will Howard. He had to start most of last season. And I don't think there's, Scott, as good as Skylar Thompson is, and he'll be back this year, I don't think there's this massive drop-off this year with Will Howard taking over. So that was certainly encouraging.
Had somebody on the chat room, go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I was going to say, in terms of Oklahoma State, I mean, my goodness, like they probably shouldn't be 3-0. Like they probably should have lost to Boise. They've had 3 real nail biters here so far, and certainly could have lost to Tulsa too. So if there's like one undefeated team so far that you'd say had been maybe least impressive, it'd probably be Oklahoma State. So they finally broke out and ran the ball with Jalen Warren against Boise, and that was the reason they survived that game. And so we'll see if that works this week, but. I like Kansas State in this game. I think K-State as the underdog has got a shot here to pull this off. And then if they do, man, that sets up for the Oklahoma game next week in Manhattan, which I think is a big one.
Golly, in Kansas State, Oklahoma, man, they have been like an abscess tooth for Texas and Oklahoma at times during the lifetime of the Big 12. Max, Arizona State, we know the story. About the investigation. Gary Lewis, who's one of those who listens to us, one of our audience or viewers, said something about, is there an update? Did you guys have something on that again, that now they start to do questions or whatever else, interviews?
Yeah, it sounds like the interviews with the NCAA are going to get started here in the next month or so, and that thing is going to keep moving along. And certainly it's strange for that all to be going on during this season with them, and certainly they've had a couple staff members at Arizona State, put on leave during all this. It doesn't seem like that all is going to, sort of come to a head here during the season, but man, it is certainly something hanging over that program, and certainly that Pac-12 South looks really interesting right now after what USC did, and UCLA loses to Fresno. Arizona State had a big chance there to go win at BYU and couldn't get it done. That Arizona State scandal is certainly kind of still simmering here and far from over.
Thank you, Max Olson, theathletic.com, every Thursday around 4 o'clock. And Max, You're a little bit old to be getting that wisdom tooth thing done. I'm telling you, that
No
wasn't
dry
fun.
sockets.
Didn't love it. Didn't
Man.
love it. Should have done it earlier. I agree with you.
When did you have yours up? All of you
I
had
was
yours up.
19.
You were 19, Craig?
18, 19. Yeah.
I was, I believe, a freshman or a sophomore in college, so probably 20. So about the same time.
Did you?
Well, the sad thing is I didn't know you guys when I was 19. I wish you'd told me that back then.
Did you avoid the dry sockets, Max? That's always the big
God.
fear with the wisdom teeth
I
coming
think
out.
I think I did. Yeah, I did. It was rough. The whole deal was rough though, as expected. So that's what it was supposed to happen. Literally, like that was scheduled to happen in the middle of like when the 4 teams coming in like was about to go down. So I got that delayed for a couple of weeks and had to come back to it. It was crazy.
Hey, Max, you won't have to worry about what happened to me. I was in college. When I came out of the anesthesia, I was hitting on the nurse. 20 years later, I went back to that doctor, and he was like, I saw you were here like 20 years ago. And I was like, yeah, I had my wisdom teeth out. He goes, you hit on my nurse.
Yeah.
Very memorable.
Hey, Paul,
flirting.
surprised to hear no Florida State, no Miami questions. A little disappointed.
I mean,
Are they playing this week? Oh, my God. I didn't even know it.
Yeah. No, a friend of mine asked, like, is Florida State win this weekend? I'm like, no, they probably, I don't think they could beat a 6-man team right now.
Remember when that game mattered?
Who do they have this week?
It's not.
Are you to
That's
that
how
point?
much
You
you
don't even
don't
know who
even
they're
care.
playing?
Yeah, no. I blocked it from my memory.
Playing Louisville.
Yeah, Louisville. Yeah, Louisville.
Oh, Louisville.
I just
Lake Cunningham's going to tear them up.
I just like saying Louisville. I just like the way that city is said.
Yeah.